Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Ishkan Gurvind ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Kantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. So reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, single volume. It's a chapter entitled Let There Be a Temple Part 1. One morning in the midst of the festival activities, the devotees of Hare Krishna land joined Prabhupada in a simple cornerstone laying ceremony. They had dug a deep ceremonial pit and surrounded it with bricks. Prabhupada descended and placed the deity of Shesha. Then, sitting on a simple platform, Prabhupada accompanied the kirtan by playing a brass gong, while one by one the devotees came before him and threw dirt into the pit, filling it, while smoke rose from the sacrificial fire. Prabhupada was planning an extensive world tour, traveling eastward to Australia, Japan, Hawaii, the US, and perhaps Mexico and Europe. It might be as long as half a year before he would return to India, and he wanted things to progress smoothly in Bombay without him. A few days before his departure, however, he learned from Brahmananda Swami that the preaching was deteriorating in Nairobi in Brahmananda's absence. Prabhupada agreed that Brahmananda should return to his duties there. Again, Prabhupada had to choose a new Bombay manager, and this time he chose Giriraj, a young brahmachari and leading preacher in making ISKCON life members. Prabhupada reasoned that since the essence of management was to collect donations and make life members, and since Giriraj was expert at that, then, even though he was quite young and otherwise inexperienced, he had the most important qualifications. Prabhupada had already found Giriraj to be simple and submissively dedicated to helping him develop Hare Krishna land. During Prabhupada's stay in Bombay, Hans Kielman, a young architect from Holland, had come to hear the lectures and had become interested in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada convinced Hans to become a devotee and to help build the Hare Krishna city in Bombay. Under Prabhupada's direction, Hans at once began to make architectural drawings for the buildings. Prabhupada said Giriraj and the others would have to collect 64 lakh of rupees for the construction. The devotees had no idea how they would raise even a fraction of that amount. But Prabhupada gave them some ideas. He talked to them about enlisting the support of influential men by using the Bent Nam system, whereby a person purchases the use of a guest room for life, and there were other ways. But the immediate step was to get the land. They had possession of the land, but before building they should have the deed. Since Mr. N was already overdue in delivering the deed, Prabhupada told Giriraj to press him to comply with the written agreement and deliver the deed at once. So a very interesting chapter coming up. So it's spelled B-H-E-N-T, Nam, Bent Nam system, which is enlisting support of influential men by using the Bent Nam system, whereby a person purchases the use of a guest room for life. So it's like a timeshare type thing. So they purchase a guest room. They did it in Mayapur as well, where someone may spend a certain amount to buy the room, and they get to use it so many days a year. That way they're always assured and the place is maintained for them. But in between other times, then the temple uses that room as a guest room and collects funds for it. Kind of patronship. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 15, entitled Narada and Angira instruct King Chitraketu. The markers in two places. Is it text 5 or 6? 5. Vayam cha tvam cha ye cheme. Vayam cha tvam cha ye cheme. Tulya kalash chara chara. Tulya kalash chara chara. Janmamrityur yata paschat. Janmamrityur yata paschat. Pran naivam adunapi bo. Pran naivam adunapi bo. Vayam chatam chayi cheme. Vayam chatam chayi cheme. Tulya kalash chara chara. Tulya kalash chara chara. Janmamrityur yata paschat. Janmamrityur yata paschat. Pranaivam aduna pibo. Pranaivam aduna pibo. Vayam chatvam chaye cheme. Vayam chatvam chaye cheme. Tulya kalash chara chara. Tulya kalash chara chara. Janmamrityur yata paschat. Janmamrityur yata paschat. Pranaivam aduna pibo. Pranaivam aduna pibo. Vayam chatvam chaye cheme. Tulya kalash chara chara. Janmamrityur yata paschat. Pranaivam aduna pibo. Let's chant. Vayam chatvam chaye cheme. Tulya chara chara chara. Did you? Vayam, we, the great sages and the ministers and adherents of the king, cha, and tvam, you, cha, also, ye, who, cha, also, ime, these, tulikala, assembled at the same time. Chara achara, moving and not moving. Janma, birth. Mricho, and death. Yata, just as. Paschat, after. Prak, before. Na, not. Evam, thus. Aduna, at present. Happy, although. Bo, O king. Translation: O king, both you and us, your advisors, wives and ministers, as well as everything moving and not moving throughout the entire cosmos at this time, are in a temporary situation. Before our birth, this situation did not exist, and after our death, it will exist no longer. Therefore, our situation now is temporary, although it is not false. Please repeat. O king, both you and us, your advisors, wives and ministers, as well as everything moving and not moving throughout the entire cosmos at this time, are in a temporary situation. For our birth, this situation did not exist, and after our death, it will exist no longer. Therefore, our situation now is temporary, although it is not false. Prabhupada's purport. The Mayavadi philosophers say, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mitya. Brahman, the living being, is factual, but his present bodily situation is false. According to Vaishnava philosophy, however, the present situation is not false but temporary. It is like a dream. A dream does not exist before one falls asleep, nor does it continue after one awakens. The period for dreaming exists only between these two, and therefore it is false in the sense that it is impermanent. Similarly, in time, material creation, including our own creation and those of others, is impermanent. We do not lament for the situation in a dream before the dream takes place or after it is over. And so during the dream or during a dreamlike situation, one should not accept it as factual and lament about it. This is real knowledge. Om Aganatimarandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshurin Militam Yana Tasma Shigurave Namaha Akam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Grim Yatkipatamam Bande Shigurim Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. King, both you and us, your advisors, wives and ministers, as well as everything moving and not moving throughout the entire cosmos at this time, are in a temporary situation. Before our birth, this situation did not exist, and after our death, it will exist no longer. Therefore, our situation now is temporary, although it is not false. So, in the cosmic scale of things, we have the cosmic manifestation. Narayana Paro Vyaktat. It said that Narayana is transcendental to the creation. So he existed before the creation, and he exists after the creation. So if we take Narayan as being representing the spiritual world, the personality of Godhead, and everything which comes with him, such as his many spiritual planets, etc., then this is reality. So that's existing before the dreamlike state of the cosmic manifestation. Then for some time, the Mahat Tattva is manifest in such a varied way as to produce opportunities for countless living entities to once again act out their desires and reap the results of their karma. And then after some time, the cosmic manifestation is once again dissolved. So in the period that it has been manifest, some living entities may become liberated from this world, and those who don't, then they go back into the tattva. It's described as being like a suspended animation type of situation. And then when the time is right again, then the material manifestation will once again come into being. So we see some materialists, even some religionists, they believe in a kind of linear understanding of creation and end of the world. But we see in the Vedic version that it's a cyclical cyclical pattern where it's not just like it comes into being once in the whole of eternity, and then once it's finished in a few thousand years, then that's it forever, and everybody, whatever situation they find themselves in, is either they're good or they're bad. Just like they have this game at parties called musical chairs. Anyone ever played musical chairs? So they put the record on, or they play some music, and say you have 10 people, then they put out 9 chairs. When the music stops, everybody has to grab a chair. And if you're well left without a chair, then you're out the game. So, and then the next round is they put the record back on and then move one chair away. And then there's 9 people, but there's only 8 chairs. So this goes on until the last person is left, and that's the winner. So this, when this material world stops, or even in this, people sometimes are worried about the calamity of the planet, etc. But they should be worried about the calamity of their own life, because we may spend their life worrying about the end is nigh, that someone's going to drop a bomb, or that the icebergs are going to come and flood us, or whatever. But while we're worrying about these things, we're not actually taking care of the main fact, which is that everything we do has a reaction, and we're accountable for that. So therefore, whatever the cause of death is, then it doesn't matter, because we still have to, death is going to come at some time, and we are answerable for our actions. And while we may be worrying about this or worrying about that, something else may come and take us beforehand. It's not guaranteed that we're going to live till we're 75, or they say the new middle age is 60. Certainly doesn't feel like it. But if that's the case, then that means we're going to live. More people are living till they're 90 nowadays. Not so uncommon. People get to their 90s. Whereas previously, if people got to their 80s, they would consider they're doing well. So it's interesting, because we see that sometimes people get caught up in conspiracies, but if people were that, and I think it's actually given the leaders of the world a bit too much credit, to be honest. Because on one hand, they're doing so many things to try to extend life, medicines, etc. And people are living older. They're finding new methods to operate in people, and now there's new, because people are living older, there's new diseases coming up which they didn't normally find, because people generally didn't live that long to manifest these new diseases. So then they're continuing to try to prolong life more and more and more, on one hand. But on another hand, they're doing other things which are jeopardizing life. And because they do not know pravritti-cha and nivritti-cha, they do not know what is to be done and what is not to be done, then there's always going to be some conflict, even conflict of interest for themselves. They don't even know how. And even if they do, even ourselves, sometimes we know what is right, but we don't do it, because we're somewhat conditioned to our own opinions, our own ways of things. So therefore, these Vedic literatures are there, and by regular reading of them, we've already came to the understanding that this Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, these are the books which are meant to direct us to get the best benefit of this human form of life. So, and we've bought into it to some degree. Each individual person has bought into it to their own level of surrender. Ye yatamam prapadyante, tamstadaiva bhajam yaham. So as we surrender to Krishna, he will reward accordingly. So as we continue to practice this, and Krishna gradually makes us more aware of what is the next step, patiently sitting in the heart as a super soul, waiting on us to surrender more and more. And I've heard it said, because I haven't got to that platform, but I've heard it said that when finally we do completely surrender to Krishna, then we're thinking, why did it take so long? Why didn't I do this in the first place? And that's easy enough to say once you're over it. It's just like sometimes, just like the other day, we had a breakdown with the van, the minibus. We were coming down from north of Scotland, and we just left the place we were staying at, and then just like 6-7 miles south, on a very snowy, cold place. Then the minibus gave up, and we were very cold. It was -3.5, and it was getting colder. And we were parked in a precarious situation with big trucks going past and the minibus shaking every time. So after, I think it was about 5 hours altogether between leaving the place and then returning back again. So during that time then, especially at the beginning of it, it seemed a bit of a disturbance. But then later on you look back and you laugh about it. So the material world is considered to be like that. We think, okay, it's such a traumatic thing, but we look back and we laugh about it, or we learn from it and we think, well, I better make sure I don't go there again. So one time, one devotee asked Prabhupada, the Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that that one who enters into the spiritual world doesn't take janma karma chimedavyam yovim what's it called yo evam yo vetitatvata chakvadeha pranarjan manayati mamati sorjana. So Krishna says, one who knows the guna and karma, my janma and karma, my birth and activities as not being mundane, then that person doesn't take birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode. So this devotee asked Prabhupada, so, what's to stop us coming back again? Is there no chance? And Prabhupada just simply says, once bitten, twice shy. It's such a difficult thing to get out of this material world that we don't forget. There's an old saying that a lesson hard to learn is a lesson hard to forget. So sometimes we keep on tripping up over the same hurdles. We have the same Maya. That can be a blessing, because if our Maya was different all the time, then we'd be constantly bewildered. We wouldn't have a chance. So we can say, okay, it's the same Maya. Sometimes we get despondent, thinking, no, I've fallen into the same Maya again. But that's actually can be a good thing. It's like, okay, now I can see that I'm puffed up. That's a fact. I can recognize that. Or I'm lusty, or I'm angry, or I'm greedy, or I'm devious, or whatever the fault happens to be, or whatever kind of conglomeration of faults we may have. But it's we've accumulated these things, and it's not our real self. So we shouldn't become despondent because it's not us. It's something that we have identified with for such a long time that we think it's us. So the gradual process of waking up from Krishna consciousness is regular hearing and chanting. And this is considered to be just like sometimes someone is bitten by a snake, and when they're bitten by a snake, they can go into a coma-like situation. And by chanting of certain mantras, then someone can be brought out of that coma. Now, we have the great pleasure of being associated with some Brijbasis at Govardhan Hill. And the old man there, Babilal Sharma, or Pitaji, as we affectionately knew him by, he's passed away now, but he was also bitten by a snake. And he experienced this coma-like situation whereby all external signs, and then he was dead. So Mataji, she called, there's a local snake charmer village, in Govardhan. So she called somebody who came along and did some mantras and tantras and brought him back to life again. So one can believe or not believe these things, but personally I've seen snakes being controlled by the sound of flute and by the power of mantras. So by the power of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and by the power of the Shabda Brahma, the transcendental sound vibration of the Shastras, then gradually we are reawakened again from our comatose situation. So when we're in this comatose situation, just like when we're dreaming, coma is like a long sleep. People who have woken of it, they sometimes didn't even know they were in a coma for such a long time. So just like when we're sleeping, we forget we're sleeping, we're not aware of it, we're just aware of what we're dreaming. And then we try to make some sense. When we wake up, we try to make some sense of it, but that's not really it's not so important. We try to make sense of the waking life, not the sleeping life. That's more important, what we're doing with our waking life. The one disciple also asked Prabhupada, if the spiritual master comes to us in a dream, then should we accept it? And he says, well, if you're instructing the spiritual master, no, that's Maya. But if the spiritual master is instructing you in the dream, then that's good. Of course, as long as that instruction is something in line with Shastra. If your spiritual master comes to you in a dream and says, you should go and open up a pub and sell hamburgers, then you would think, I don't think that would be my spiritual master's. I've never heard him say anything like that, so I wouldn't. And if you were confused about it, then you would go and ask him or ask some other devotee. So sometimes the poor materialists are in such a confused and intoxicated state, they're hardly even aware of whether they're awake or asleep. There's not much difference in their consciousness. So this term that the Mayavadis used, Brahma, was it Jagan Mithya? Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. The Brahma is truth and Jagan, or the material universe, is false. So it's only false in the sense that if you're sleeping and you're about to be devoured by a tiger, you're not going to be killed because it's only in a dream. But in the dream, it seems very real and you appear to be suffering in that dream. Or sometimes you appear to be enjoying in a dream and it appears real, but when you wake up, then you're no longer surrounded by hundreds of servants and living in a big palace. You find yourself living in the ashram at Krunabhavan or living at home in somewhere in Scotland. So this is the situation that we're thinking in this life, that I am this, I'm male, I'm female, I'm from this country, I'm from that country, and these various bodily identifications. And as long as we identify with these first and foremost, then these things will have the effect upon us. So we have to keep on adjusting our consciousness to identify as eternal servant of Krishna and try to act in that way. And Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, by Shravanam and Kirtanam, then we remember Krishna. Remembering Krishna is not just some kind of like scholastic thing, it's not a jnani exercise, but it's actually opening the heart, purifying the heart, so that we remember the Lord, as in we remember our original constitutional position. And so that's no small thing. But we have every help that we need for doing the job. It's like sometimes the government may employ a special task force like the SAS they have, which is Special Air Services, very highly skilled people to go and do a job, and they've got the whole backing of the nation behind them to do something. So just like ourselves, we may have some personal task, but we have the whole backing of the Guru Parampara behind us to help us in our struggles to overcome the attachments and the illusions by which we are besotted with. We have the Shastra, we have the association of devotees. We have the practice of Krishna consciousness. Also mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada speaks in the purport about this term Nityabada. So Nityabada means eternally conditioned. Some people say that the soul is eternally conditioned. And Prabhupada explains that this means that since time immemorial, because the soul by nature is Satchidananda, that's its vigraha, that's its form, that's its swarup. So therefore, how can we be Nityabada if we're by nature Satchidananda? So he says it's because it's been such time immemorial, it's untraceable, that it seemed like eternity. But when we become Nityasiddha, eternally perfect, once again, we'll realize that we were actually never Nityabada, we were just covered. And Krishna explains this in Bhagavad Gita, very beginning, in the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter. He talks about as the embryo is covered by the womb, as the fire is covered by smoke, and what's the third one? Yeah, they're covered by dust. So similarly, living entities covered by these various material qualities, covered by the material energy. And basically it's lust, which is the driving force of the material world. So lust means that we desire to enjoy separately from Krishna. And this is actually also the evidence that we have love of God, dormant love of God, because it's just misdirected. We're trying to take our loving propensity and enjoy over the material energy as little supreme Ishwaras, little Mahi Ishwaras, tiny little Ishwaras. We have a little control, and whatever tiny little control we get, we become puffed up about it. For so long we take to get a human form of life, and then when we get it, we get some more control offered to us. So whatever little control we have, we try to use that in Krishna's service. And also it's good for us to realize that actually there's so many things which are out with our control. Just like over the last few months, and maybe over the next few months, then perhaps someone's got a cold or a flu or a COVID. But any time of the year, we can be afflicted by something or another. And some of these things come and go, and everything comes and goes, but some of them take a bit longer, and some of it brings an end to this term of life. So we can see that actually we don't have any control. Sometimes we think we're in control, but we don't know what's going on inside the body, what's ticking away there, which is going to say, which is going to say, oh, now you have to get serious. You've been dilly-dallying about your Krishna consciousness. Now here's a warning sign, got to get serious. The warning signs are there all the time, but because of our strong desire to enjoy, we tend to not take notice of them. So sometimes because we have a strong enjoying spirit, when someone speaks like this, we might get a bit despondent, thinking, oh, I just want to enjoy. Why are you trying to make me miserable? No, but this philosophy of Krishna consciousness is directing us to not take shelter. In Krishna consciousness, we have so much enjoyment anyway. It comes in of its own accord. And there are some austerities there. I was listening to one lecture by Shivaram Swami recently, and he was saying that without discipline, one never achieves anything. If you look at anybody great in this world, whether material or whatever, they never didn't just fall on their lap. They had to engage in some discipline to get there. So to speak of the highest goal, prema pumartha mahan, prema, Krishna prema, then we have to have some discipline there. First of all, we have some regulations, and by following them, then the mind gradually starts to come under control. Bit difficult in the beginning because sometimes the mind doesn't want to come under control. It wants to just go and do its own thing, be unrestricted. But allowing the mind to be unrestricted means that we continue this dreamlike state in the material world. And we put off waking up, just like the alarm clock's going off, but we keep hitting the snooze button. And we just, I'm enjoying that dream. I just want to continue with this dream. The dream is very nice. Sometimes people are so attached to sleeping that it's all they want to do. And then they can get a body suitable for that, because the human form of life is meant for more than that. So Krishna is not judging us, he's giving us opportunities, and we select what we want to do with that. And then out of his kindness, he gives us a body which suits our desires. He doesn't approve of it, but he lets it happen because this is one of his opulences. He's detached. So where the Mayavadis go wrong is that they think that this material world doesn't exist at all. And it's not very practical, because if you say, well, do you really believe that? And they say, yes, okay, we'll just walk through this wall then. If I come along with a baseball bat and I smack you in the head, then it doesn't exist. It's not real. They'll protest because it's not practical. They will experience it. So the illusion is not that it doesn't exist, is that it's a temporary manifestation. That's what the illusion is. Lord's energies are eternal. Not in the material world, they're not eternally manifest, temporarily manifest. There was one instance where one devotee was in Nottingham doing some Sankirtan, and he met this Mayavadi, or so-called Mayavadi, somebody who fancied themselves as a Mayavadi philosopher, and he said to him, so he was trying to convince the devotee that it was all one, and so the devotee let him do his spiel, and he says, so you're really convinced it's all one, what's yours is mine, what's mine is yours, and I am you, you are me, and we are all together. And he says, yeah. He says, okay, so give me my wallet. He says, I've got a wallet inside my pocket here, pointing to him. He says, so give him my wallet. And so he really kind of got this man to buy into the whole thing. And then either he would have to admit that his philosophy wasn't practical, it wasn't real, or he'd have to give it because he'd pretty much put his money on that. So he gave him it. And then he went away. And then later on, the guy came back and says, I need some money for my bus fare. He says, oh, just go and ask me over there. I'll give it. So he demonstrated whether the guy got the message or it's another thing, but at least the devotee engaged him in some service. It's not so practical. Whereas the philosophy of Achinta Bheda Bheda Tattva and the philosophy of Ishopanishad, that we have our own quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. This is the practical philosophy for living in this material world and properly respecting others' property, respecting other people's space, and accepting our own lot as well. So otherwise, what happens is that we envy someone else who is better than us or who is more than us. And envy is not a practical thing. It doesn't make us any better by being envious of someone. It makes us a worse person. So the philosophy that this material world is an illusion, that philosophy is an illusion because it's not the fact. The fact of the matter is that the material world's illusion is simply this temporary manifestation, and us being manifest in this material world is also just another temporary manifestation. Just like in the ocean, sometimes a little bubble comes up and then it bursts. That's what our life is like, bursting the bubble. The bubble is coming up, it gets bigger, then it just kind of pops at some time. and then another bubble comes up. So we're just like bubbles in the cosmic ocean. And these these mirages which we see before us, such as temporary manifestations, they're simply like apparitions. Sometimes you see a puppet show, someone's hand is inside the puppet and they're doing so many activities, just like sometimes our devotees put on some puppet shows and they're very entertaining. And so they may have some people who are friends or their enemies or whatever, these are going on, and people believe the puppet show, that they're not seeing who's operating the puppet and what's inside that puppet outfit. It's a hand, it's making it move. So just as we buy into that illusion of the puppet show, we also buy into this illusion that this body is the self and other people are their bodies. But ultimately, it's the soul which is making them active. The soul is giving motion, and the soul is making decisions, etc. And it's been described just like sometimes in the ocean, some seaweed comes together, it gets a bit entangled sometimes, and then it separates, never to come back together again. Then in the material world, relationships are like that also, where we come into contact with certain family members, etc., for some time, and then when we're split up from them, and then we get lost in oblivion. So this is what is being experienced by the king and queen here, that for some very brief moment in time, some soul appeared to be their son, and then is now disappearing. And he's preaching them the Bhagavad philosophy, so that they may never be caught up in this lamentation again. So this is the beauty of Krishna consciousness, that it may be a little painful to begin with. As we wake up to the illusion, then we become, we remember that we have another life which we belong to, which is our real life. And just like Mangalananda Prabhu was singing, no more sad goodbyes. Okay, so we'll just stop there if anyone's got any questions or comments.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the class. A question in general, not related to the class as such, and maybe yourself and if Raghunath Prabhu can also comment, say. So, like, I kindly get to give class, which is a bit awkward for me though, in Srimad Bhagavatam class in the temple. But say generally, what is the qualification for someone to be able to give class?
The qualification is that they're chanting 16 rounds, following 4 regulative principles, and they're also reading the Vedic literatures. They're reading these books. If someone isn't, that's my understanding, if someone isn't following or isn't chanting or they're not reading the scriptures, then we can't guarantee what they're going to say is going to be Bhagavatam, because we're supposed to be representing Vyasadeva. Is that okay? Anything else? So what we're speaking in class, it should be according to the philosophy we've learned from Srila Prabhupada, according to the acharyas in the books. We have a class guideline. I was looking for that sheet the other day. I couldn't find it. It used to be kept in here, and I looked in there, couldn't find it either. But we have certain guidelines there which we try to avoid conspiracy theories, because they're not necessarily Bhagavatam. You know, the big conspiracy, if we want to talk about conspiracy theories, for example, is the conspiracy that Maya has got us under a spell, that we think with this body, and everybody even the conspiracists or non-conspiracists, they're all under this conspiracy of Maya. And also we shouldn't use the Bhagavatam for some kind of political agenda, things like that. We should also only speak according to the conclusions of the scriptures which we've been directed to study, such as this Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion, Bhagavatam, CC, all these books which Prabhupada gave us. So, and we shouldn't speak on controversial things. So if we find that list, then you can see also some of the guidelines for giving class. And it shouldn't be used for glorifying ourselves either. Trying to show how advanced we are, or trying to make some statements which make us look like we're some kind of liberated soul or something like that. So we should be simply using it to try to share whatever knowledge. Prabhupada says whatever, a simple version also of preaching or sharing Krishna consciousness. He says that Prabhupada says that whatever you've learned in Krishna consciousness, just try to give that to others. So it's not that we have to be 15, 20 years in the movement before we can give class. Whatever our little inspiration is, which is keeping us going in Krishna consciousness, which inspired us to come to Krishna consciousness, then that's as relevant as anyone else's realization. So we all have our realizations. The fact that we're here means that we have some inspiration or the fact that we're, even if we're not here at the temple, the fact that we're engaging in devotional service. And sometimes it might even be that people may think themselves not worthy, but if they're asked to do it, then it's an opportunity. We take the opportunity. Okay. Iskon Guru Govinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.
His Grace Prabhupada Prana Prabhu ki.